episode of the Silmarillion Film Project. I'm your co-host, Dave Kale, and we're back with another very exciting episode where we're going to be talking about frame, which is, I think, one of the fun features of this entire endeavor, that we don't get to just tell one story, we get to tell two stories at any one point in time.
That's right.
And so I am joined, as always, by Trish Lambert, the Tolkien Maven, and Corey Olson, the Tolkien Professor. How are you guys tonight?
Very good.
Just Tolkien and Tolkien. We're just Tolkien all the
right.
time.
Yeah, so
that's right. It's and I believe you were saying earlier, Trish, that it's the Tolkien Professor, the Tolkien Maven, and the hipster turned
And the
father.
former hipster turned father. Yes, ex-hipster turned father. Yes.
All right. I'll take it.
That's right.
I need to change my Twitter handle.
Yeah. Anyway, no, so the frame is always fun because this is something that was, kind of controversial at the beginning, and we've had a couple times when people have been wondering, like, should we stick with the frame concept? But I have really loved the frame as a way of contextualizing, especially the way in which the frame enables us to bring the themes that we're exploring during these seasons into contact with the Lord of the Rings story, like the Lord of the Rings world and the Lord of the Rings characters. The thing that I love specifically about the shape of the frame that we've been doing, how our frame elements, right, our frame stories, have all been taking place in the, few decades before the Lord of the Rings, right? It's sort of the immediate build-up to the Lord of the Rings, which is really a marvelous way, I think, of doing in small what the Silmarillion is doing bigly, right? That is, the Silmarillion is it sets the stage in many ways, right? It establishes these themes and which the Lord of the Rings then both recapitulates and in some cases, brings to fulfillment and everything. So that I think is the frame really enables us to kind of draw those two together, right? By using the frame to show how these themes from the Silmarillion are really compellingly relevant to this, the way that the Lord of the Rings story is building up. It creates this opportunity for us to show, through the two timelines, which are, kind of coming together, right? How the Lord of the Rings story is really the culmination of, like, the fruition of all of these other stories that are coming along before. And I just love the overall shape of that. And it's been really fun working through the frames and things. And it's definitely a challenge, often a creative challenge and an intellectual challenge, trying to fit everything together. But I think it's been great fun. So that's what we're gonna be doing tonight, and that's pretty exciting. Announcements before we begin, however, our big announcement of the week this week is we have officially opened registration for Signum Path, the new Signum program, the professional development program for foundational skills to improve your ability to write, to read, your emotional intelligence, and other career skills, things that will really help lots of people, anybody in any job. Individuals can enroll, corporations can enroll to do a training program with an entire team. You want to talk to your manager about setting up a referral program where, they're able to, people at your work are able to take Path classes and get reimbursed for them. That kind of program is also really easy to set up. Lots of opportunities for people to be able to take advantage of the Signum Path program. So I encourage you to go to our page, path.signumuniversity.org, and find out more about that. So I'm super excited about Path and our Path launch this week. We also have our online teaching mentorship program. And I was just thinking about this earlier today, talking with a bunch of our Signum mentors, especially as we're heading now towards the summer, and as more and more schools are getting ready and kind of confronting the idea that things in the fall still might not be 100% back to normal as far as classes are concerned, and how do we best prepare for that? I think that a lot of schools and a lot of teachers have been, I should say, kind of I don't know, maybe operating out of a little bit of denial, right? Just kind of hoping they could survive through these couple months and then that the problem would go away. But I think a lot of people are kind of confronting the fact now that things are going to be, this is going to be a bigger challenge. Well, we're still here, right? We're still here to help and to offer assistance to folks, individuals or groups who would like some advice and assistance in planning their conversion from the teaching that they normally do into teaching in an online environment. We can also help with consulting and larger scale programmatic advising on folks who are trying to build a really good distance program, perhaps alongside. Again, there's a lot of things. I think there's going to be a lot more in the way of hybrid programs and things like that moving forward. So it would be now's a good time, right? As we are still several months away from the fall 2020 semester and opening of schools again. Really good time to be working on that stuff. So you can go to our mentorship site there, signumuniversity.org/mentorship, and get some more information about that. Send us an inquiry. And another announcement which just came out today, we have officially rescheduled MythMoot. MythMoot, of course, was originally scheduled for the last weekend in June. That still technically is clear, but we don't want to take too many chances with the state of Virginia. State of Virginia stay-at-home order ends, I think, on June 10th at this point. So technically we're still okay, but we wanted to push it back for everybody's convenience, and just to kind of to play it a little bit safer with the calendar as far as that's concerned, and with the state of Virginia. So we're planning now to hold it on August 6th through 9th, 2020. If you've already registered, you should have gotten an email about that. If you haven't registered, you still can. So now there's a little bit of extra time to register, and for people to join us down there in Leesburg, Virginia on August 6th. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And those are our announcements for the evening. So let us think about the frame. Let's first a little summary, right? A summary of the past and the future. We have been following roughly Aragorn's life and career so far in the frame, right? Not exclusively Aragorn, obviously, but he's the one that we have kept coming back to. We started with young Estelle at the age of 10 or 11 in Rivendell, learning lessons about the creation of the world from Elrond, right? So that was when we got all the Valar stuff, the early history of the world in that kind of a more explicitly pedagogical context, right, as he was being trained and growing up there in Rivendell. In season 2, we shifted to Arwen while she was in Lothlorien, hanging out with Galadriel and Celeborn, and contemplating the place of elves in the world. We had a lot of, the sort of the atmosphere of many elves deciding to go to the Havens and to leave Middle-earth, and we were depicting Arwen being really kind of torn about this and trying to understand what is the right thing, right? What is the calling? What is where is Elvenhome, right? That was the theme of season 2. And I thought that was really cool. We had her talking to Galadriel and Celeborn, both, and some other things going on there. So that was fun. The season 3 frame, which of course you'll remember, season 3 was the rebellion of the Noldor and the kinslaying and the arrival in Middle-earth. We had teen Estelle at about the age of 16 or so, running away from Rivendell and joining the Dunedain during a harsh winter. So we had basically, young Aragorn young Estelle, still not Aragorn yet, right? Young Estelle, kind of learning his place. We were explicitly paralleling Feanor and Estelle. We had rebellious teenage Estelle, feeling like he is being hemmed in a narrow place there in Rivendell, right? And wanting to see more of the world and learning some lessons. And of course, showing, hopefully, how Aragorn's trajectory was diverging from Feanor's trajectory. But having Feanor throughout the season kind of lurking there as a warning, right, to Aragorn. all the way through. So that was fun. Season 4, last season, we went back to Bilbo. The theme of season 4 was forgiveness and reconciliation. And we had Bilbo's return to Erebor, the trip that Bilbo made back with Gandalf and Balin for and this part we totally made up, a 7-year commemoration of the Battle of Five Armies. And we had lots of tension and struggle between, things still not totally at peace, especially between the elves and the dwarves, and with King Bard kind of caught in the middle there, and Bilbo causing trouble as he was wont to do, and making everything better. So that was our theme, tied into our frame rather, tied into the main theme. We have the plan for season 6. Season 6, we're going to go back to Aragorn again. We're going to have the 20-year-old Estelle in Rivendell learning of his heritage and meeting Arwen, which I think was the very first frame idea that we thought of. When we were talking about the frame originally, we were like, well, obviously, when we do the Beren and Luthien story, Aragorn meeting Arwen has got to be the frame, right, for that season. So that was the biggest no-brainer of all of the frames, and so that's why we have already decided on the frame for next season, but don't have so much to decide. Or don't have so much decided, I should say, yet in the frame for this season. So having decided last session our theme for season 5, which I'm still really excited about. I would not have guessed this theme rather, but I'm really interested in this theme. The theme, of course, being change, and specifically trying to capture and to convey how the world is changing, not just like that things happen, right? And so things are different from one end to the next, or even necessarily that people change, though that's part of it too. But trying to touch on, from an elvish perspective especially, how the world is changing, right? Now that the sun has risen and things are just not the same as they were back in Valinor. Things are just not the same as they were before the rising of the sun. How do we kind of capture that sense, that elvish perception that the world is changing, and what goes along with that change, ultimately the fading and diminishing of the firstborn? And how do they come to grips with that? Because, of course, we know that their reaction to change is a major thing, right? I mean, we're going to see it all the way up through the Rings of Power and Lothlorien and everything else, right? This is a major thing. So I think this is a great theme for us to talk about. So what frame topic should we have in order to try to touch on that theme? And of course, we want to try to fit it into the overall timeline here too. We've managed so far to be doing these background stories. We're trying, of course, in our frame stories not to spoil too many things that we'll want to really emphasize in the main storyline when we get there, right? By the way, that's going to be the biggest challenge for next season's frame, because obviously we're going to want to deal with Aragorn learning of his heritage and meeting Arwen when we get there in the main storyline too, right? So we want to handle that, but we want to handle that in a way so that we don't just spoil ourselves, right, for later on. But that's a discussion for next season. Here are general suggestions given the framework, right? I mean, because of course we have, since we're in, season 4 was 2448 and season 6 is planned to be 2952. We've got a 4-year window in there, right? So it could be a Bilbo frame, an Aragorn frame, an Arwen frame, a Thranduil frame, or a White Council frame. It could take place in Mirkwood, Lothlorien, Rivendell, the Shire, on the road. Lots of possibilities here. So we were given some concrete suggestions. And I want to kind of go through the concrete suggestions because some really, really good ideas here. It chanced that he returned to Rivendell after great deeds in the company of the sons of Elrond. So Estelle growing to adulthood in Rivendell, ending with Elrond revealing his heritage to him. So this would be like immediately before, right? We could get some of the adventures of young Aragorn here, right? We last left Estelle as a kind of moody 16-year-old, right? So coming back to Estelle, at the age of 19.75 or something, right? And show how he has changed and matured, and him sort of preparing for the very significant change that's about to come to him, right? So that's one interesting suggestion. We've got the White Council, a meeting of the White Council in Rivendell or Lorien or somewhere else, paralleling Fingolfin's attempts to prepare the Noldor for a war in Morgoth, with Aragorn and Bilbo making appearances. So certainly the White Council talking about what they should be doing will have plenty of parallels for that in the deliberations among the Noldor for what they should do and how they should handle the whole Morgoth situation. Another suggestion was Thranduil responding to the Nazgul retaking Dol Guldur in Mirkwood. Possible appearances by Bilbo and Gandalf during that story. So have a Mirkwood elf-based storyline, which would be interesting. We were on the fringes of Mirkwood in season 2 in the Arwen storyline, but we haven't really had a like Thranduil and Legolas fixed focused discussion there. So that would be interesting. That would be a new thing. Bilbo's journey from Dale back to the Shire. This would be continuing the story, straight after there. And he could, with him passing through Mirkwood, Rivendell, and Bree, that would give us plenty of opportunity for him to interact with various people. So even if we're following Bilbo, that gives us many different opportunities for different kinds of stories there. There's something kind of appealing to me in that idea, mostly because of how quickly the journey home is treated in The Hobbit, right? It gets like a few paragraphs, really, to describe the journey itself. We get more at Rivendell when they get back to Rivendell, but, the vast majority of the journey home is told very, very briefly. So the idea of kind of lingering a bit more on Bilbo's journey home is kind of a fun idea. Arwen's journey from Lothlorien to Rivendell, ending before she meets Aragorn. So go back to Arwen, whom we haven't spent any time with since the season 2 frame, and basically talk about her build-up. So this is sort of the other side of the first suggestion, right? Instead of showing Aragorn how he is right before the big change, right before his big moment, we show Arwen leading up to that. So kind of filling in where what's been happening with her since we left her, and what frame of mind she is in when she has her encounter with Aragorn. And then finally we have a sort of a bad guys frame, or a bad guys centered frame. Sauron returns to Mordor in 2951, so that's right in the middle of this window, and he sends Camel back to take back Dol Guldur. So the return of Sauron to Mordor, right, and his open declaration of himself. That is, I think, a really interesting idea. And Trish, this was your suggestion, right?
Yeah, because I got to think. Originally, I was kind of gonna make a case for something with Thranduil, like you mentioned, and in Mirkwood, and then it occurred to me, it's like, well, wait a second. So where's Dol Guldur and all this? Because it hasn't been taken down yet. So then I went to the Tolkien Gateway and looked, and it was like, lo and behold, this is the time during which Sauron declares himself. Now, you got to excuse me, but I'm like, okay, how did he do that? Did he send the mouth of Sauron out on like a PR tour?
Right.
Hear ye, hear ye. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I just how does he do that? But anyway, and then I thought, well, that is actually part of this theme, this unexpected change, because, in Minas Tirith, that was definitely an unexpected change to have Sauron declare himself. And at that time, Denethor is 20 or 21. He's the same age as Aragorn, and Ecthelion, his father, is the steward, and Thingol is the king of Rohan. And I thought, well, it could be interesting to kind of see how Gondor and Rohan, and maybe with some cameo or a cameo by Gandalf, react to this, as well as maybe having some bad guy stuff, like showing the Mordor side. I don't know, but
yeah, it is
that
interesting.
to me was really interesting.
I agree. Oh, yeah, sorry. Stephen is correct. Stephen was pointing out to me that I skipped one because they both started with Bilbo, so I overlooked it when I was reading down the list. The other one is not Bilbo's journey back to the Shire, but Bilbo returning to the Shire, and basically showing the change involved there, like Bilbo changing, right, while the rest of the Shire is still being resistant to change, right? So there's a lot of opportunity within sort of the Shire culture itself to talk about change. Sorry, I just wanted to mention that I did skip one. Yeah, so I think that these are all interesting suggestions. Let's see. The ones that I like best. I kind of like the Aragorn and Arwen suggestion, but I also kind of feel like we're going to do them a lot next time. And basically, I feel like the more we do the build up there, the harder we're going to make it for ourselves next year in some ways. Like we're going to kind of end up stealing our own thunder a little bit.
We're going to end up having to do it in real time somewhere down the line too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, that's one thing. Exactly. One factor to keep in mind here is that we definitely want the choice of the frame topic to be about the theme rather than about coverage, right? It's not about story coverage, because we're going to cover the story later on, right?
Right.
So, yeah. So for that reason as well, I don't see. I mean, it could be made to work, but the Aragorn and Arwen suggestions, though they're very interesting suggestions, don't seem to me to fit really compellingly with that theme, especially since both of them are essentially looking forward to a thing that's not going to happen in this season, right? So we could work into it, but it just doesn't totally grab me in the same way.
Well, I also think that doing that this season would kind of take away a little bit from next season. I mean, I think having it be fresh, in other words, having not had them in this season,
exactly,
I think is going to be more powerful.
Yes, especially since we last left Aragorn as a moody 16-year-old rebelling against authority, coming back to him only now, right? By now, I mean later, right? At the beginning of season 6, would be, I think, a good thing, right? Rather than showing further development prior to that.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, so we'll see. Yeah. My first thought is to remove those. I like the idea of a Mirkwood storyline. I think that that's something that I think we may want to come back to, because here's the fact of the matter. What happens in Mirkwood, right? I mean, like, nothing ever happens in Mirkwood. It's not quite true. That's an exaggeration. But still, like, it's not like Thranduil is himself the very most interesting character in all of Middle-earth, right? In other words, when we do the main storyline through The Lord of the Rings and the preceding periods, how much time are we going to spend in Mirkwood, right? When Bilbo isn't there, I mean, right? We'll get the hunt for Gollum. We'll get a couple moments that we can do in there, but I think that doing a season's frame in which we are really kind of investigating, really kind of exploring the Mirkwood elves a little bit. We did them, of course, last semester. Listen to me.
Semester.
Last season, to some extent, is. I think that would be. So we started off with them last season. We got a little bit, but I think there's definitely more that we could do. But at the same time, although I like the idea of doing the Mirkwood elves for a frame, this doesn't feel to me like the theme that really demands them, right?
Shows them off well.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that there's not stuff changing, but again, like a season of change, coming to grips with a season of change, that's not really the Mirkwood elves. They're not really changing, even when things are changing in Mirkwood, right? Even with the whole we're slipping from Greenwood the Great to being Mirkwood, except, oh wait, no, now it's back to Greenwood the Great again, except, oh wait, now it's not anymore, right? I mean, it's not that there's no change at all, but still, it doesn't grab me in that way again. So there's definitely some interesting potentials, but that's I don't think I would go there either. And I would kind of lump Bilbo's journey in there too. I think of the Bilbo suggestions, I like the Bilbo and the Shire much better. The Shire as a parallel to this sort of elvish resistance to change, this deeply rooted tendency in the elves to be resistant to change. Mapping that onto the Shire hobbits has a lot of potential, I think.
Because they're pretty deeply resistant to change as well, Shire,
exactly.
for different reasons.
Exactly. And no, I think we could totally do that, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure they're resistant to change for the same reasons, right? My fear is that I haven't done it. Like, I haven't sat down and really thought through this question. Like the question of compare and contrast. That's not a question. The prompt, right? I have not responded to the prompt. Compare and contrast the Hobbit's resistance to change with the Elvish resistance to change, especially like the Noldorin resistance to change. And although I haven't really sat down and thought that prompt through, the instinct I have before I've really worked out the details is that in the end, I would probably end up finding them very different. I would probably end up thinking that in the end, there are perhaps even more differences than similarities between how they're resistant to change. So my fear is that the superficial parallel there in the resistance to change might end up being a little bit misleading in some ways and might end up leading us to kind of strain the parallel in order to sort of establish it more clearly. I'm not sure. Like I said, it might work. It's a really intriguing idea, but I'm not 100% on it. I think it might not pan out when we worked on it in detail. And that leaves me with the White Council meeting or the bad guy plot, Sauron's return to Mordor. I also am really interested. Francis was saying that, a frame from the bad guy perspective really is intriguing. It is really intriguing.
Yeah.
Especially since we've been making, we've been saying for a while now that Sauron is our clandestine protagonist of the entire film run, right? So kind of coming back to him at that moment is tempting in some ways, just for that reason alone. But Trish, in the end, what I find most compelling is what you were saying about Gondor. Here's the it's the first thing I thought of when you suggested that, or when you were talking about Gondor, Trish. The immediate thing I was thinking of was Gandalf riding into Minas Tirith, right, in Book 5, and shouting to people from horseback, right, that, for good or ill, the days that you have known are gone.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's kind of what happens. I mean, like, that's only the final fulfillment of what begins to happen, right, in this moment when Sauron comes back. And I think it would be really fun to have somebody like Maria, exactly. I would love to have Icthelion say to young Denethor those exact words when Denethor's a kid, right? And to say except maybe change the pronoun, say like the days that we have known, right, are done. That I think would be really, really cool. And yeah, Marie, I was kind of thinking the same thing. The White Council stuff and the Mordor stuff, they are two sides of the same story.
Interesting.
I mean, to some extent, I mean, they're both, sort of responding to the same events and stuff. I would not think there would be any objection to doing some White Council action, right, during the course of I mean, if we did this moment, if we had the sort of the premise, the primary premise of the theme, or frame. Boy, I'm just not doing well with the speaking tonight. If we have the primary emphasis of the frame be the return, the public declaration of Sauron and the subsequent retaking of Dol Guldur.
Right.
If that's sort of the premise, right? But it doesn't necessarily need to be the sort of the only or the primary action, right? It would be.
I was thinking reactions to it, because especially like with the theme being unexpected change, I was thinking about, actually my first thought had even been to have this is really out there, to have the sort of protagonist of the frame almost be like an unknown person, like a wayfarer.
Right.
Who goes from place to place and gathers up, reactions. But I thought, well, an unknown wayfarer isn't going to have, isn't going to be able to walk into the White Council.
Right, it's not going to have access.
Exactly
right.
Work.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think, Sauron declaring himself and then seeing the reaction. And by the way, just a little side benefit or side thing. I know this is the frame, so we can't spend a lot, but I'd love to see Denethor be very identifiable to Boromir when we meet Boromir later.
Right. Right.
Young Denethor be, just not the same guy, but when we see Boromir later, we can see why his father would favor Boromir over Faramir, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Marie, of course, suggests Gandalf the Grey Pilgrim as potentially the Wayfarer wandering about.
That is Marie, see? That's actually not a bad idea, because he would be talking to Ithilien. He would be talking to Thingol. He would be talking to the White Council. Saruman. He'd go talk to Saruman, right?
Yeah.
So that could be kind of interesting.
Yeah, Stephen is suggesting, here, and I'm sorry, Stephen. I'm going to keep calling you Stephen H. because I'm still not really sure how to pronounce your last name. Stephen H. was suggesting Glorfindel as a possible wayfarer.
That is also a good
more
idea.
Glorfindel's never a bad thing.
Never a bad thing.
He's a little conspicuous as a wayfarer. He's kind of high profile. Does Glorfindel do incognito? I don't know.
Maybe it's Glorfindel that Aragorn gets the idea of Strider from, right? The persona of Strider. Maybe Glorfindel's, the role model for that.
Like a vagabond, dirtied up Glorfindel. I'm having a hard time with it. I am like it. I think Glorfindel has like high beams and low beam settings, but I'm not sure he does incognito.
The low beams are pretty. Yeah. He's still going to shine through the cloak, kind of thing, right?
Exactly. Well, okay.
But I do like the idea of Gandalf, especially because we're going to get Myron, Aloran, and Curanir, in their Middle Earth guises. If we did it that way, if that's a kind of I could get all carried away, and I got to keep in mind this is the frame; it's not the main story. So we got to be really elegant about how it's done.
We have a relatively the number of action moments are pretty few, right?
But we do have, because we've got however many episodes of it. We could see Gandalf or the Wayfarer, whoever it is, be in different places. Maybe not every single season, every single episode, but you know what I mean? It's like he'd move around.
Gandalf does make sense as somebody who's going to be spreading the news, right? Bearing the bad news, right? Ill news is an ill guest, and there's Gandalf coming in, right?
Because it's kind of what he was sent over to Middle Earth for, right? To kind of
in a sense,
troops
So that works. Here's my one problem. People. I know there are several people who are interested in White Council ideas. I would be happy to hear a sort of defense of that specifically, because myself, I'm a little bit plus minus on the White. Well, okay. Now let me explain what my concern is about the White Council. Is that, first of all, I think although the White Council is a good parallel to like the deliberation of the elves, it's almost too good. It's a little on the nose, right? And in particular, one of the things that I like about the frame is the way in which, again, we get a different angle at the same theme, right? And if what we're getting is the elves of the Third Age dealing with change, while they're as a frame for the elves of the First Age dealing with change, we're not really. It is a different angle. It's a different time, and the circumstances are different. But it doesn't really feel to me as rich in that way. I'm not saying we can't include the White Council. We could have the White Council. Gandalf could end up, if we do have Gandalf be the center of the frame, then we could have him like end up right at a meeting of the White Council or something. Sort of declaring things to them and moving forward. That would be a neat culmination of the frame, right? If in the final episode,
actually, that's a pretty good idea.
he shows
or
up
the
and
final
he's talking
couple of episodes.
Yeah. So
especially if you have like Gandalf and if you had it over a couple of episodes, you could even have a private conversation between Galadriel and Gandalf about the situation, which would be kind of interesting depending on where we are with the main story.
Yeah, exactly. Now Stephen H. is also suggesting that if we save the White Council meeting of 2953, that is the one where Saruman is sort of betraying them, but they don't know it yet.
Right.
He was suggesting we could have that sort of echo the near knife. Arnoidiad, yes, that's possible.
Although I wonder if we want to save that meeting for the main story later on down the line.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, we would, in some ways. That is, we would definitely want to cover that. So, yeah, it is. So, to me, the ideal frame moments are moments like we did, especially in season 3 and 4. And, 2, 3, and 4. Well, no, all of our previous ones are ideal. What they've had in common is that they are major characters, recognizable characters, in circumstances related to the major storylines, but containing no major plot event, right?
Right.
For all of them, we're making up stories. We're just making stuff up, right? Like, we do it, like, newsflash, we don't have any evidence that Aragorn, as a moody teenager, had a period in which he was rebelling against Elrond's authority. Like, we don't know that that's true, but it's plausible, and it helped us to deal with Aragorn and his development and his trajectory as a character and as a future hero. It allowed us to introduce Eladon and Elrohir, and to give them some interesting fleshing out in some ways. It enabled us to think about the Dunedain, and how the culture of the Dunedain works. There were lots of possibilities there. So that was really cool. Anyway, there's lots of great possibilities there. But again, no major like canonical plot event has yet occurred in a other than, again, people being in the place where they're supposed to be at the time they're supposed to be, right? Like we had young Aragorn meeting Bilbo at the end of the frame, right? When Bilbo came through Rivendell on the way home. So that was, but that hardly counts as a canonical event exactly, as of course it's never described. So for this reason, Marie, this is also why Gandalf's wandering is appealing to me too, because then the emphasis is on moments, like things that we know must have happened, but it doesn't spoil any event, doesn't spoil any story, right? Instead, we can get a series of perspectives, right? We can get Gandalf's learning of this fact and reacting to it, right? We could then, we then get, he like goes to Gondor, and we can have him like meeting people from Gondor and being taken to Minas Tirith. We can have him in Minas Tirith. We can have Gandalf and Denethor. We can have Gandalf and Ecthelion. We can have Gandalf, and he can go through Rohan on the way back up because he's headed up to Rivendell.
Talk to Thingol.
And so he can meet. He can be talking. We can get the Rohirric perspective on this. He can then go through Lothlorien and then end up in Rivendell.
Oh, and by the way, I just wanted to tell folks this. I told Corey already. This blew me away. When this happens, Theoden's like 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah, Theoden is 3. Denethor is
like you have this little toddler in Thingol's
Denethor is like 20, right?
Yes, Denethor and Aragorn are like 20, 21. Yeah.
Yeah, they're the same age about.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Now,
just blew
Rhiannon,
me
you're
away.
right that this is a lot of characters to introduce in the frame, but the focus here would not really be on characters so much as we wouldn't be making a list of characters to round out and fill in because it gets frame, right? We can't really do too much character development in the frame. But what we can do is we can give snapshots, right? And snapshots of famous characters is something that we have done, right? Which I think is interesting. And that is to say, so like getting a shot of 20-year-old Denethor, we don't need to like develop 20-year-old Denethor's character. We're going to have time to develop 20-year-old Denethor's character, or, you know, subsequent to 20 years old Denethor's character, when we do the Throngil story, which I assume we're going to definitely want to do later on. But just to glimpse him, right? And to get a little bit of something from him. But again, to me, the way to organize the frame would be, let us look at this series of reactions, right? Let's look at like, and again, all of it fits really well into the context of change, right? Because this is not just, hey, something happened and now things are different. This is it really is the times they are a change in moment, right? Sauron has declared himself, the enemy has returned to Mordor. From a Gondorian historical standpoint, the bad old days have returned, right? The days of myth and legend, but not all in really good ways, have come back now to Gondor. Mount Doom is in flame once more, and now what? Now what's going to happen? War is not yet broken out, right? But times are, but change is coming, and none of the humans. So the thing that is to me most appealing about this frame concept is that it enables us to parallel the main action really closely, but in a different proportion, because it's the humans who are primarily reacting. We can focus at least for the first half, 2/3, 3/4 of the season on human reactions, and so the humans themselves, like Denethor in his lifetime, right, and that can be one of the things that Denethor is recognizing. That could be a conversation that Gandalf and Ecthelion and Denethor have, right, to say, Denethor, in your lifetime, the Great War is going to come, right? So, it's not, Ecthelion is going to be asking Gandalf, I would assume he would be asking sensible questions like, do I need to sound the call to arms? Like, is Sauron going to attack? Is that what this means? Are we going to be under assault? And Gandalf would say, no, that's not going to happen. Not now, but then to have him, turn to Denethor and say, in your lifetime, it will happen. So again, there's that sense, so that Denethor himself is confronted with this same realization, right? That many of the elves, many of the Noldor, in our first age story are being confronted with, right? That, this, not just like in my lifetime, this will happen. Like, of course, everything will happen in your lifetime if you're an elf, but no, that like, the season has changed, right? Things cannot ever again be what they were. And in a way of looming darkness, and with, the assaults of the enemy over the horizon. So, yeah.
By the way, another small thing that doesn't so much have to do with the main story, but somewhere along this line, if we do decide Gandalf is our wayfarer and the frame basically revolves on him, at some point, even if it's a nonverbal expression on his face, the ring, somebody may mention what of the One Ring, and he's going to have to be thinking to himself, oh my God, Bilbo, And that's all we have to do. We don't have to do anything else, but just, because that's when he starts to have this conversation with Frodo and stuff too, right? It's
the shadow falling on his heart. Then, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Anyway, that's neither here nor there with the main story.
No, it's interesting. I mean, it would be interesting to sort of connect that through in some ways. Okay. So, yeah. Now, Stephen Cover, I agree that the audience doesn't need necessarily to know or recognize the characters right now. That they don't have to know the full significance of who this Denethor guy is or who this Ecthelion guy is. that's okay.
Sure.
I think if they don't. And that's why Rihanna and I don't think it's a huge deal if we're showing lots of different characters, because in a sense, fans will recognize them, and that's cool.
I was going to say the fans will love it.
Yeah,
the fans will love it.
They
they'll
would
brag about the fact that they actually know who these people are.
Exactly. And the more excuse we can give to geeks to pontificate and flex in front of their friends, the better. I'm always a fan of that. Yeah, interesting. Marie was saying that someone on the discussion boards was cautioning that we might not want to have Bilbo and Saruman in the same place on account of the ring. Agreed. Though I'm not going to lie, kind of tempted to do it for exactly that reason, right? But anyway, well, it's fine. We won. I will resist temptation. Yeah. Anyway, so no, I think that there's a lot of potential here, and of course, we can also be if we're very clever, we can also be playing with the difference in perspective to both in general and towards change in particular between elves and men, which is one of the things we'll be dealing with in our main storylines. But it will. That will work as well in the frame, but again, I think it won't be too on the nose. In fact, if anything, it's going to kind of come across differently, like because there's a sense in the main storyline that we're starting from the elvish perspective, and then we're kind of introducing the human perspective and becoming more familiar with it over the course of the season, right? Whereas if we do Gandalf scouting and learning about Sauron's return, and then starting off in Gondor and everything. We're starting with the human perspective, in other words, and then going to the elvish perspective at the end. So we can do a kind of a symmetrical thing. I think would be interesting, actually. So yeah, I like this idea. How does and of course we do have some canon here, a little bit of canon, in that we know that I guess the moment I'm really thinking of is the moment when Gandalf returns to Elrond and confirms to him that the necromancer is Sauron, right, which is earlier on. Yeah. So when I'm thinking of canon, I'm thinking about the conversations that Elrond and Gandalf have. We get several of them, especially in Unfinished Tales. A lot of Gandalf and Elrond's kind of working together, right, over the years. And so if that's the culmination, right? If that's the culmination to the frame, if it ends up with Gandalf and Elrond, I think that could work. That could work really well. And here, this would enable us to get some White Council angle without having an actual White Council meeting. We could have him talking to Galadriel, and then we can have him talking to Elrond. We could even have him talking to Thranduil if we wanted to do that.
I was thinking about that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly, Brian. Something like that. Gandalf talking to Elrond and deciding that a White Council must be called. Something exactly. They would have plenty to be talking about there. But again, remember, we're not trying to move the Third Age storyline plot along in the frame. That's not the goal of the frame. In fact, if anything, we want to avoid the Third Age plot line, other than occasionally getting kind of chronological tags to be able to give cues to our readers of when this is, right? So, like, for instance, for that reason, strapping young 20-year-old Estelle, who is scheduled to be told his true heritage in a few weeks, right, could make a cameo at the end of, in the final episode or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But
as a precursor to next season's frame. Huh?
Yes, exactly. So I'm we would have to lay out with the frame which reactions we wanted to do. Now, is Fengel still king at this time? Who's king? Fengel is king.
Fengel is.
So Fengel is going to still be in Gondor then at this time, which is super convenient, actually.
Was he in Gondor at this time?
Yeah. Yeah. No, wait, Thengel is king already? Oh, okay, if Thengel's
he's king already.
Thengel's king already. Okay.
He's king already.
All
yeah.
Right. If he's king already, then he's got to be back home.
Yeah.
All right. No, that's too
And
bad.
like I said, Theoden's like
if he had
3
been
or
on the
4
spot,
years
that
old.
would have been handy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. So we start with the men. We can get a bunch of different human perspectives on. Well, first of all, let's start at the beginning. How does Gandalf find out? What happens there? Gandalf would be Snoop. Now, Trish, I'm coming back to your question, and so, the joke you were making earlier about how efficient is Sauron's PR department.
Yeah.
How does Sauron openly proclaim himself? I guess by firing up Mount Doom again, pretty much, is kind of a dead giveaway, right?
I mean, all Tolkien ever has said, right, is Sauron openly declares himself.
Right.
That's all he ever says.
Right. And what exactly does that mean?
How do you do that when you're a disembodied eye, basically?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Obviously, Twitter.
Right.
Twitter, yeah.
Twitter, yeah.
Well, of course, I made jokes during Riddles in the Dark about the Nazgul having on their carpenter's belts and hard hats, rebuilding Barad-dûr, and then he flips the switch, right? Flip the switch, and the eye comes on at the top of the tower.
Sauron is here. Sauron is here.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, and I jokingly talked about the mouth of Sauron. I don't know. Would there be, but I can't imagine that he'd have a role. I mean, what would he do? I don't know,
No. And even the mouth of Sauron would be...
I think you're right. I think an eruption of Mount Doom would be, don't you think? Something like that?
Well, I'm kind of...
That would send fire and smoke into the sky kind of thing.
You know what I'm thinking about? I'm thinking of the description of what he was doing at the beginning of Lord of the Rings, sending emissaries around.
Right.
I'm kind of wondering if how do we think? Do we think he would announce himself with is he going for shock and awe, or is he leaning into his Anatar giver of gifts side? Trying to make nice with people.
Well,
which would make Gandalf even more concerned.
The one clear piece of evidence that we have about this, that we don't know exactly the date, is, and though it's presumably significantly later than this, is the messenger that comes to Dan in the Lonely Mountain. Right? Yeah, exactly. Sauron the Great is coming, so he sends a messenger, which we were saying in Exploring the Lord of the Rings, that messenger totally sounds like the mouth of Sauron. We totally are of the opinion that it was the mouth of Sauron who was sent to Erebor. No, Stephen H., when we're not talking about him playing nice in the sense of being friendly with his neighbors. We're talking about whether he's going to, announce his name with some kind of assault, or whether or not he's going to, just sort of let it be known in some other way.
Do it like that emissary. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a quid pro quo kind of stuff. Yeah. It's like, I'm here to announce, and we want to be partners.
Yeah. Right. Maybe he might go around demanding things, and offering things and demanding things.
Right.
Carrot and stick.
And now clearly he would be doing this. All right. So here's one.
By the way, question for you: Is Osgiliath Osgiliath at this point? I mean, is it a functioning Gondorian place, town, city?
No.
Okay.
No,
I can't remember. Okay.
No. Yeah. And no, I agree, Nick. We don't want to we don't want to spoil. So yeah, the sending of the messenger to Erebor.
Right. That's later and it's part of the main
later.
story, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's also, we're pretty early for that. I mean, it's going to be a little bit more awkward if Glowin at the Council of Elrond is like, 50 years ago, we received a message, and it's getting, time's running out, man. Like, he gave us 50 years.
To mention it until now. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
We've been stalling this guy for decades, but we think he's on to us, right? Like,
how many times did he say the messenger returned?
Like well, it did return a couple times. But it wouldn't surprise me even if it had been a couple years that had been happening. But I mean, again,
spread out over 50 years. That's a bit of a stretch.
It is. Yeah. And I mean, we would have to change the time. I mean, we are given the timeline. We know that the messenger from Mordor comes to Erebor after Balin leaves to reclaim Moria. But I mean, we could change that chronology, but this seems a strain. I mean, I don't think that really works. And as Nick was suggesting, we might want to save that for the main storyline anyway.
Yeah.
Now we could do something. I still am kind of into this sort of symbolic thing, like Mount Doom exploding or something. Then the other thing is, of course, the Cursed Rider ends up taking over as lieutenant of Dol Guldur, right?
Yeah.
So it could even be that, that. Oh God, now somebody's back here, and that means that Sarah. I don't know. I mean,
so we had the eruption.
I got a question.
Dave, go ahead.
I was going to say, when Sauron's sending out all these messengers, and trying to make trying to make nice-ish, there's got to be a few places where he didn't bother, right? Like I'm pretty sure he didn't send anyone to Gondor, right?
Right. To Minas Tirith. Yeah.
Like, why bother?
Yeah.
No one's gonna buy it. So I'm wondering, like, because on the one hand, I feel like we probably don't want to do anything that would undermine if he runs around attacking a bunch of people or invading, or if he's like puts on too big of a display with Mount Doom or something. I feel like that might undermine future attempts to be like, hey, it's your friend Sauron. I have some presents for you.
Well, I mean, he's not going to play that. He's not going to play the friend card, though. I mean, we're told that he doesn't play the friend card after Numenor, that he can't appear in pleasant form anymore.
Sure. But he's certainly playing the diplomat, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes. As evidenced by his approach to Erebor, we do have him attempting to not pull an Anatar situation, but to have him attempt to gain their willing agreement, right?
Yes. He's not just marching armies in and taking things.
Yeah. Oh, and so, by the way, Trish, we had several helpful people were looking it up for us. 2475 was the abandonment of Osgiliath. So it's been 500 years since anyone's lived there.
Okay. Well, never mind then. Yeah. So.
Yeah. But
and you know what though, even at the end, right, when the combined armies of the West march on the Black Gate, even then he sends an emissary out and says, "Okay, here's the terms of your surrender."
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe it's not implausible that he might even like just one half-assed attempt, send someone to Minas Tirith and say, "Okay, you need to surrender all these lands."
Right. Yeah. Okay. I just all right. So just for the record, y'all can make this easy on yourselves and just give up now. What do you say? Right? No. Okay. Well, can't say I didn't offer. Right? That's. Okay, well, hang on a second.
Well, that is true. In that case, it could be the mouth of Sauron. I mean, we could have a similar emissary, visit like what Erebor is going to get 50 years down the line, or however many years it is.
Yeah. So I'm having a thought. There is, of course, one place, one chunk of places to which he would be sending messengers very openly, and that is east and south. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Hi there, former vassals. I'm back. Yes, It's been almost 3,000 years, right? You've probably forgotten about me, but hi, right? Back in business, recalling you to your loyalties of your great-great-grandcestors of 3,000 years before.
And by the way, one of my servants was a king of yours a while back.
Exactly,
The
yeah.
Nazgul.
Yeah. So...
Actually, he'd probably send his Nazgul to do that, wouldn't they?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we know that he sent, 3 Nazgul to retake Dol Guldur? What were the other 6 up to?
Right.
So sure, absolutely. Hey, didn't y'all have kingdoms over there and stuff? Shouldn't we do a, kind of get let's go do some ballot stuffing and make me king again over in the, but seriously, he's going to have to build up his power base. And so it is certainly to the people in the lands where he once held undisputed sway and was worshipped as a god, that he's going to want to declare himself extremely openly and be doing some very aggressive recruiting campaigns. What if Gandalf is over there?
I was going to say that could be how.
What if it's in
Gandalf...
the east? That
right.
We don't have to put Gandalf all the way in the east.
No.
But what if Gandalf is in the east, and he is, and he hears about this, right? I know he doesn't go there, Stephen. Fine, make it the south then. He goes to the south, so make it in Harad then. We'll set it in Harad.
Yeah, so the idea of Sauron openly declaring himself could be the openly declaring himself to his vassals, his former vassals in these areas, right? So he doesn't really futz around declaring himself necessarily to...
No, Stephen Gandalf does go to the south. He has a name. He's called Incarnus in the south. He says he doesn't go to the east. But by the way, let's not be slavishly literal in our interpretation of that line, to the east I go not. I don't think that Gandalf has like I refuse to cross this line.
Or he could just have left off the word anymore.
Anymore.
Not anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. He's not saying I never went.
Right.
Yeah, he doesn't say I never went. He said I don't go there. Besides which, to the east I go not. That does not sound like he's talking about geography as much as
actually, it sounds like Yoda.
Right.
Truth,
well, it sounds like he's talking about politics, not about geography, right? He's talking about what names he had in various places. So in saying to the east I go not doesn't mean I've never been there and the east is a strict Gandalf no-fly zone. Rather, what he's saying is I'm not friends with the folks out in. They don't call me anything in the east because I've never been chummy with them because they're all Morgoth worshippers over there. Right.
That's true. You're right. That's what he's saying.
That is what he's saying. Really saying. I don't have a name over there.
Especially if you think about the storyteller here, because Tolkien, that's exactly how Tolkien would write it, right? He writes that way. It's not a literal
right. That's a good point, because we are talking about Gandalf. What he's really saying is it's not part of my rotation.
It's exactly. Yeah.
Right.
I don't. I've
went there once.
I've cut them right out of my route, right?
They're not on my route.
My postal route.
I really like this idea, because I'm thinking one thing, since the theme is change, right?
Yes.
Right, especially unexpected change. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea that maybe at the start of the series or the start of the season, Harad or one of these vassal states, I'm kind of digging the idea of people down there maybe not being overly thrilled when Sauron's emissary shows up.
It's going to be a huge. That would be. It would be fascinating, wouldn't it? If the first this first cultural change that comes when the Nazgul return to Harad, right?
Yep.
So we show how the Haradrim themselves are going to be oppressed and enslaved. And remember, it's 70 years. It's a generation in the future, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody that Gandalf is hanging out with, none of the folks who call Gandalf Incarnus are gonna be fighting in the war. It's their kids that are gonna be fighting, and their grandkids that are gonna be fighting in the war, and that's what we can see, how the whole this is the beginning of a cultural shift in Harad. Yeah. Right.
No, this could be
and I can see at the end of the very first frame story, right? The Nazguls come, talk to the king, and the very last frame of the frame story is a close up to the gray pilgrim, right? Who's been cloaked all this time, and he turns kind of to the camera with this like look on his face, like, oh no.
Right. It would kind of be even more fun if we had people talking about Incanus, right? Like, oh, we should ask Incanus about this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And again, only the geeks, the delighted geeks in the audience will know who that is, right? Stephen H. wanted to suggest, by the way, that when we have Gandalf in Harad in the south, we should have him dressed like Merlin at the end of Disney's Sword in the Stone with the Bermuda hat, the Bermuda shirt and the shorts and stuff. Yeah. I think that we should take that into
he's a man after my own heart, this Stephen H.
Yeah.
I like it.
But you know, Francis, several people were suggesting, Rhiannon was suggesting, Francis is suggesting, we have some pretty obvious blue wizard potential here.
I know, that crossed my mind. Now, but do we know specifically where they went? I mean, would at least one of them be in the south? Did they stick together? We don't know, do we?
It's real vague. I mean, like, if there's a place where we've got leeway, it's got to be the Blue Wizards, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's true.
It's pretty vague and pretty non-certain. I mean, that is like the only things that we have about the Blue Wizards are very brief and contradict each other. So, like,
right. And we don't know that Gandalf wasn't in touch with them, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that would
we
be
have no reason to think
rotates down that way, right? Is to stay in touch with the two Blue Wizards.
Oh, wait, hang on a second. I agree with Stephen Cover. We also need we also need a picture. At one point, we have to have Gandalf riding a big white elephant. It just has to happen.
Show us the meaning of haste.
No, because remember, it's Frodo says that, right? That he wished they had a whole, when Sam does the Oliphant poem, and he says, I wish we had a whole, army of Oliphants and Gandalf on a white Oliphant at their head, right? Yeah, that totally. Nick, you need to do this. Like, this is, I think, I can tell that Nick is excited about the direction we're thinking here. But it's all good. But anyway, whether or not Bermuda shorts are indeed included, I certainly, even Maria's agreeing.
No such thing need happen.
No such thing need happen was Nick's comment. But anyway, I do agree. Gandalf should not be looking like Gandalf the Grey. Like, he should not be wearing standard Gandalf the Grey garb. He should look like Incanus. He should be blending in, right?
Right.
That would be.
I think that's really interesting.
That would be cool. So,
but I really like this idea with the Nazgul coming to Harad to announce it as far as being dovetailed to the theme of the season. I really like that.
And so I would rather Harad than the East anyway. Like I said, I'm not worried about sending Gandalf to the East. And by the way, I was laughing before, right after you guys started talking, because Lincoln had suggested, when I was talking about Gandalf not going to the East anymore, Lincoln said 2 stars. Yeah, like, I went to the East, hated it, it's a dump. Gandalf totally panned the East on TripAdvisor, basically. It just was, not worth
Too hot. Sand got into everything.
yeah, exactly. But
I'm also really digging the idea. I love the idea that the frame for this season could be a tragedy. It'd be kind of like depicting pre-World War II Germany.
Right.
Just like seeing how bad, like just the slow erosion of all that's good. And
yeah, exactly. That's actually that's exactly the parallel that Marie was thinking about. Germany when Hitler comes and declares the
same
new
sort of thing
Roman
too.
Empire.
Like Hitler did the Anatar thing.
Yeah.
Says.
No, I think this is really cool and gives us a really, really interesting and nuanced way to think about a bunch of the things that we're going to be thinking about during the course of the season, dealing with change, thinking about this sort of world that we're trying to create, and thinking about Morgoth's influence on the world and what Morgoth is doing and how they can handle it, right? What they're supposed to do. Ecthelion is going to be confronted with this. What does he do?
Right.
Does he attack? Does he try to hold Sauron in leaguer? In which case, Ecthelion could say, or young Denethor could use some of Boromir's future language, right? About Gondor, bulwark of the West, right? And Gandalf be like, tell that to my friends in the South,
Right.
who are not behind the bulwark of Gondor, not to mention everybody else.
Stephen Cover and Nick both kind of made a similar point. Stephen says, I like the examination of Herod, especially because of Sam's later wondering whether the South Run is really evil.
Yeah.
And Nick says, and we can completely defang the accusation of non-European people are evil, which I love.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, well, obviously we'll have to think about this a little bit, how we exactly want to handle the Haradrim situation. Yeah.
And we're thinking about this being a part of the frame. Like, in other words, the whole frame wouldn't be this.
Wouldn't be in Harad,
story,
yeah.
right?
So if we start with Gandalf in Harad, and have a few episodes with Gandalf in Harad and showing the influence of the Nazgul and the enough to show the trajectory of the cultural change that's happening down there,
Right.
In Harad. And I'm thinking, I don't think that Gandalf has. There's no Haradrim Shire, right? Like the Shire is like people that Gandalf has invested in, and is close with. I don't think that he's invested in the Haradrim or in like a, we could show like a rural Haradrim community where Gandalf is kind of welcome and known like he is by the Tooks in the Shire. We could do it that way. We could also have it be a little bit more limited, right? We don't need to have a parallel to Gandalf's whole relationship, like his relationship with his investment in the whole Shire. Clearly he's not invested in the Haradrim in the same way, but there could be an old Took of Harad, right? That one guy that he connects with, like Gandalf clearly did connect with Gerontius Took. And so have his...
Or
Harad
another one, it could be, more like the Herod, more like a king or a sultan type situation, and one of the Blue Wizards could be his advisor, so that what Gandalf is actually, when he comes south, he visits that court. That's another possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he could even be behind the pillar when the Nazgul comes in and has a chit chat with them.
Right.
I have a controversial question.
Okay.
Why can't Gandalf be as invested? What if this is like the anti-Shire, where he's there and he's working and he fails, he loses,
and he watches it go down? So the scourging actually, scouring actually does happen.
Honestly, the mental picture, the sort of slightly crazy mental picture I have of the frame this season is the entire season is in Harad, and we have a whole, basically we have this, like, I guess it would be a C story. We introduce some characters. We have maybe there's like sort of heroic leader of the Haradrim who like tries to stir up some resistance to the Nazgul, and there'll be some other character, maybe a young ambitious character who undermines him and like usurps him at the end, who's a collaborator with the Nazgul, and it's basically
but this is just a frame.
It'd be the fall of Harad. Yeah, no, I know. That's why
and
I said it's crazy.
And then in the end, we have Gandalf the Grey Pilgrim, leaving after failing, essentially.
Yeah,
after failing. Yeah. Is that a bad idea?
It's.
I thought
it's a bit of a downer, but then again, we're talking about paralleling this with the Dagor Bragollach, so that kind of fits.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Especially if because then the parallel is not between like Fingolfin and Gondor exactly. The parallel is between Fingolfin and Gandalf almost, right? Like Gandalf's project in the south, right? The Encanus project would be essentially him trying to build up resistance to because he knows that Sauron is coming back. He discovered that the necromancer was Sauron. He knows this is going to happen eventually, right? So he's decided now to work in Harad in anticipation of this, because he wants to prepare a resistance against the return of Sauron.
I want to answer Stephen Cover's question before it goes away. He wanted to know about discussing the Blue Wizards on the forum. Absolutely. I mean, start a thread. I think I can't remember if there's a frame thread or not. Marie can remind me, but yeah.
We talked about. I'm trying to remember what we've said about the Blue Wizards in the past. I know we haven't totally finished. I mean, we haven't fleshed out their whole story. I know that we were.
Well, at some point, we're going to meet them in the main story, right? I mean, in the main story, we're
definitely.
going to see them come across.
Definitely.
So it could be this is like, we don't explain who. If we run across a Blue Wizard in this frame, we don't explain who he is. But then later on down the line, they'll go, oh, that was the guy that Gandalf saw, and blah, blah. I'm also with Marie. Marie's like, but I want to see Ecthelion. I'm like, yeah, I know, me too.
There's time. He's not going to die for a bit. We got some chances. I mean, we're going to get him when we get Thorongil anyway. So,
Thorongil, that's true. Thorongil's going to, so that's true.
Yeah. No, I think this is really cool. Yet Lincoln is suggesting we could have a heroic Haradrim character who dies like Fingolfin when the resistance fails. Yeah, he challenges the Nazgul to combat and dies, right?
Yes.
If we wanted to do a direct parallel, we could do something like that.
I love it.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay, so okay, all right. Well, but wait, hang on, Marie. I was right. So Thengel is still in Gondor. It's like the next year. We're right around when he comes to kingship, right? Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. 2 years. 2 years before Fingal's death. Okay. So we still do have Thengel down in Gondor.
Oh, okay. All right.
But boy, yeah. Now we're getting all carried away with the Haradrim story, though, which I
Hey.
which I like.
What if Gandalf leads a team of folks from the north, like brings down like a team of
SWAT team.
Yeah, SWAT team come down and assist the resistance. So
I
maybe
was going to go the other direction.
We're following some Rohirrim and some Gondorians who are down in Harad. Kind of
like what Aragorn does later, yeah. I was thinking the other direction, which is we have the failure happen earlier than the end of the season, and the last few frame episodes are Gandalf coming back and reporting, or at least to Gondor.
It would be tough though. I feel like if we're gonna invest in that much of a shape to the Haradrim plot, it should either be the whole thing or it should just be a little segment, right? And I mean, if we were to stick with the original idea of doing like segment in Harad, segment in Minas Tirith, segment in Rohan, then we could totally do that. But I think if we're going to do this whole like rise and fall of like the tragic downfall or anticipation or foreshadowing of the ruination of Haradrim culture, that sounds like a whole story. And if we kind of
I agree.
Run off to Minas Tirith.
So then Dave's idea of getting a SWAT team in or something might.
Yeah, so I think if there's things we want to do with like Gondor or then I think the natural thing to do is to take some people from Gondor and transplant them into our Harad storyline.
Right.
And then you could have some people coming and going. You could have one episode, a messenger arrives from Ecthelion with some news and
Operation White Oliphant.
Love it. That's really cool. Yeah. Oh, very cool. So anyway, with the Blue Wizards question, if we're going to involve the Blue Wizards, we have to first make the fundamental and very important decision of whether the Blue Wizards are good guys or bad guys, because that's not a given, right? And I think we had talked about maybe splitting them and going 50-50 in on the Blue Wizards, because Tolkien had the two different ideas about them, right? One was that they fell completely and became, worshippers of magic cults in the East. And there was the other idea, which was never articulated and only hinted at in the names that he gave to them. And that was like that they were triumphantly bringing the light into the darkness, essentially. So it's, and as much as anything is clear about the Blue Wizards, it is clear that he was kind of going back and forth about whether or not the Blue Wizards should be fallen like Saruman, or whether they should be good guys but not quite so effective as Gandalf in the whole thing. Certainly, the time when he was conceiving them of them as having fallen completely was in the middle of his major Gandalf PR campaign segment of his career, Tolkien's career. I mean, like that there was a block of time after The Lord of the Rings was published when he was spending a lot of time building up Gandalf and emphasizing Gandalf's importance. That's the Radagast has failed period, to which I still object, and I do not want Radagast to be depicted as a failure. Yes, Lincoln, I agree. I also strongly dislike the Gandalf is the only wizard who succeeded in his purpose at all story. Because it's far from, like, no goodness of the other good wizards is going to take away from Gandalf's awesomeness, okay? Like, it's just not going to do it. Whereas the fall of the other wizards does kind of take away from Saruman's fall. So I'm not a huge fan. So again, I'd be kind of tempted to do one of each, to have one be sort of like faithful but beleaguered, maybe not, maybe it doesn't accomplish much, maybe it does, maybe there's a part of the story that we don't know about, that in the East, had it not been for the work of this blue wizard, there would have been this whole other massive army that Sauron would have had at his disposal, or, any number of directions we could go like that, with the story of the good guy. As far as the bad guy, the hard thing with the bad guy, if one of the blue wizards went bad, we have to sort out his relationship with Sauron, right? Because, he's not being brought in. Maybe, he just becomes Sauron's cat's paw. But again, we can't just make him the Saruman of the East, or else that's boring.
Well, he could have been offed already or something, by the time the war comes.
Yeah.
Plus, I assume, they don't have to be together, right? So, like, the bad guy could be in the East, and that could be another reason why Gandalf doesn't go East, is because that guy's in the East, and then the guy who's still, the light in the darkness is the South guy. That could be.
Maybe.
We have a lot of latitude here.
Yeah. But I don't think we go with the blue. I don't think we touch the blue wizards in the frame. For one thing,
okay.
We already have a lot of story in this frame. Now that's okay.
Right.
When I think about like the storyline that we had in season 3 with young Aragorn, the storyline that we had last season with Bilbo and Erebor, it was a complicated story that we were telling in the plot. I kind of think that in the frame, I kind of think that the season 4 frame is probably, I don't think we want to try for more plot than that. That seems to me pretty close to the top of the line in the quantity of plot that we want to try to squeeze into a frame. So I think that we can do it, but I think we don't want to complicate it further. And bringing in a blue wizard and giving his history and how he ended up being where he was and what Gandalf's relationship with him is, that I think is too much. We'll have plenty of time to do. Let's do justice to the blue wizards. By giving them a full nice arc, which culminates.
They may get a frame of their own someday.
Who knows, right? Who knows? Mike Hockstad suggests that we could simplify things just by having the good blue wizard and the evil blue wizard fight to the death at some point. So
there you go.
That's
that's it. Then they're out of the picture. We don't have to worry about them anymore.
Yeah. But sorry, Dave, what were you just saying?
I was saying this is a backdoor pilot for a spinoff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Oh, yeah, good suggestion. Stephen Cover says we just drop a house on the bad one. So that's talk about your simple solution.
And then the good one comes flying down inside a bubble. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's true. We're neglecting the obvious route here. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, good. I like this. So let's stick to Harad. Now it's hard because, of course, this means, Trish, that I can't get my Ecthelion delivering that line, you know, which I would ideally have liked.
If he shows up, if he comes in as part of the SWAT team, we might be able to somehow.
So, Dave, tell me more about the SWAT team idea.
I'm just thinking, is Gandalf down there? What's he doing? What's he doing down there? How's he doing it? And I'm thinking, like, at some point, maybe he's just down there initially on one of his Gandalf. You know, he's on his doing his route,
gathering gunpowder for his fireworks. Right?
Yeah. Actually, I mean, where does he get all that stuff?
That's why they've never heard of fireworks in the Shire, because they're imported from Harad, so it's really far away. Yeah.
So maybe he's down there, and maybe it's just it's like an episode or two in, and then at some point, the mouth of Sauron or the Nazgul, whoever shows up, and Gandalf kind of initially he lays low. He's doesn't reveal himself. I'm kind of even thinking maybe he's in communication with like whoever the leader. I'm picturing like a kind of there's sort of the older leader, and then he's got a son or a
court thing, was kind of how it was. Yeah,
and he's got a son or a nephew or somebody who's like, this is going to be the person who's going to stab him in the back and going to collude. But so Gandalf's down there talking to him, and
like Miglin, sort of.
Yeah, doing his thing, and then the Nazgul or whoever show up, and he kind of sees like things are taking for a turn for the worse rapidly. And so he realizes like, okay, we got to start some kind of resistance, like an underground resistance. And he thinks that he needs some assistance. So he, I don't know if he
sends an eagle. He sends an eagle.
Yeah, there you go.
Or a butterfly.
A moth.
One of the two.
Exactly.
Yeah, moth. Yeah.
Basically calls for backup. And so backup comes down in the form of basically characters from Gondor and Rohan that we really want to involve in the season.
Gandalf lights the beacons and Gondor comes.
Yeah.
Not the whole beacons. I can't imagine that, like, the whole army of the Rohirrim descending upon Harad would go over well. It's not necessarily going to make the situation better.
So we have... it's kind of like when Aragorn and Éomer go off and, at the end of Return of the King, right? They go off and clean stuff up, right? So he has these guys come in. I just don't know how he sends them the message to come.
I'm not sure.
The reason I'm not sold on the SWAT team idea is that I think it's too action-oriented. Because, first of all, I think that Gandalf's primary project down there is cultural, not... like military or something, right? He's doing the Gandalf thing, right? He's like inspiring people with hope, and he's the opportunity that Gandalf sees, because Gandalf, he's thinking big picture, right? He's playing the long game against Sauron. And so he's thinking, okay, Harad has always been a thorn in the side of Gondor and a tool in the hand of Sauron, right? So I'm going to do my part to assist the war that he knows is to come. He's known about it for decades now, ever since he found out that it was Sauron in Dol Guldur. I'm going to do my best to undermine the war that I know he's eventually going to fight, right? By trying to just deprive him of an ally. If I can go and try to help and influence the Haradrim to be resistant to Mordor when it comes, so that maybe... dream of dreams, they would be willing to be allies of Gondor in the war to come rather than their enemies, right? That's like Gandalf's big plan. So at no point would it then really be about combat or military action, because even the resistance is sort of it's a battle for the hearts and minds of the Haradrim. It's not a physical conflict could come. I do think that most of Gandalf's friends are going to die by the end, right? They're not going to fare well. And
I guess I'm not even necessarily imagining that the purpose of these people coming down. It
would be diplomatic, perhaps, more than combat, right?
Yeah, like quite frankly,
make allies.
Actually, could be a diplomatic mission. Quite frankly, this is really just a ploy to we we had
get to
some
see young
characters that we
Denethor.
were. Well, we had some characters that we wanted involved in this season, and now we've decided the setting will be Harad, and it's like, well, okay, I guess how are we
How do
going
we
to use
get him there?
so-and-so?
Yeah.
Yeah, gotta get him there somehow.
I
So,
don't think we need
whatever
to.
it takes.
I think we can.
We
But I
just have
do.
to give up on our
The one thing I
Ixalia
do
line.
think is I could imagine a scenario where Gandalf is there and then the Nazgul show up, and it's like things take a turn for the worse rapidly. Like within
Right.
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
an episode or two, Gandalf's like, well, this is heading south, and like I need to
No pun
pivot.
intended.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So
Further
I could
south.
see him saying like I need some assistance, and so maybe it's a diplomatic mission, an official diplomatic mission.
Try
Maybe
to
it's an
offset the
underground
nose.
diplomatic mission. Maybe it's an intelligence mission. I don't know, but I think it's plausible that he might decide like hey,
Try to include. Yeah.
because we certainly have precedent in the text of him calling on other people for help. He asked Aragorn to help him find Gollum.
Right. Sure. I'm just wondering. It seems premature for him to, because I mean, look, the Haradrim and it's not like he's starting from scratch here, right? The Haradrim and and Gondor have been enemies for a long time. There's a lot of historical bad blood here. So, if he's fighting the battle for the hearts and minds of the Haradrim and seems to be losing ground, calling in his close friends from Gondor seems like a bad idea.
Probably not the best idea. True.
What if he doesn't call for them? He's just been writing letters back, and then they just show up. Hey, we're here to help.
Right. Yeah.
I think it wouldn't be more underground. It would have to be more underground, like intelligence or underground.
I'm kind of imagining he's at the like the base of the resistance, and with the like enlightened, open-minded Haradrim, and then maybe he's got some.
You may actually almost have a parallel to Elendil in the royal house in Numenor, where you've got the good Haradrim with Gandalf, kind of, but they don't make it. They don't end up making it.
Right. Yeah. That's actually really interesting to do a kind of parallel of the faithful, almost, right? But it's not exactly the faithful, except it's like inverted, right? Because those who are faithful to the old ways are those who are going back to Sauron, right? So instead of being faithful to the old ways, it's the innovators who are the resistance. But although the structure is almost mirror reversed in that way, it would be parallel in other ways with like the King's Men and the rule of Sauron coming over. Anyway, I'm loving this idea. So I'm thinking, I think we've got to do. I think we can only do one of two things with our Gondorian characters in the Gondor thing. We have to either A, give it up, and just do the Harad thing because that's cool, or B,
which I'm totally fine with,
just having Gandalf go there, like have him go to take counsel with them to get. But that's perfect. He could come and go. So maybe we'll have an interlude in the middle of the season where he goes to Minas Tirith, and actually now we can have our cake and eat it too because we get to do our Minas Tirith episode. Right.
Like Felling can have his line.
Yeah, we could. I mean, he's going to want to warn them anyway. And so actually that would be kind of interesting, right? If Icthelion asks him like, okay, thanks for the warning, Mithrandir, right? Like, where are you bound next? Like, to Rohan, and he's like, back to Harad.
It's like, oh, hell no.
Yeah,
right.
and they're like, wait, what? You're going back to Harad? And maybe this is, one of the reasons why Denethor thinks he's shady from the beginning,
Oh, yeah, there you go. That's a little extra benefit. And I think Gandalf would be like, no, the reason I came to tell you is so you could pass the word. You send people to Rohan and wherever, right?
Right.
I mean,
right.
Now, I don't know about if Gandalf wants to, like, tip Elrond off at all, but, I mean, again, we could have Glorfindel traveling with Gandalf.
By the way, one benefit.
I mean, if we're gonna have Icthelion, we could have, have our cake and ice cream and eat it.
Yes.
And Glorfindel will be like, "You go to Gondor. I'm gonna go to Rivendell. Let Elrond know."
Right. Yeah.
You know, another benefit of doing this is one thing you could do is you could use this to turn up the clock or to speed things up in Harad, where Gandalf, we take an episode off where he goes up to Minas Tirith, and then by the next time we show Gandalf walking back into Harad, he looks around, he's like, oh,
Big change.
crap. It's really, it's even worse than I feared.
Big change. Yeah. And the thing that's cool about this is we can certainly parallel it with the main story. I mean, we could fashion the events of the frame to be really well matched to the main story.
Mm-hmm. No, I think there's some really great potential here. I'm loving this. I'm loving this story on its own. Like, just, I think this story is a really cool story all by itself. I think it enables us to play on the theme, but to play on it from a really different angle, and a really, really interesting angle. It certainly enables us to do a storyline which does not spoil anything from the Lord of the Rings era, when we get into the Third Age. This ticks a lot of boxes and is really, really cool. And if we can get to Gondor anyway, we can still do our other things. So yeah, it doesn't spoil anything, especially, Marie, if we do resist doing the Blue Wizards, because then we still have the whole, if anything, the only thing we've managed to do is do a little bit of setup for stuff to happen in Harad. We will have given some context of what things are like in Harad at this point, so that we are more prepared to talk about that when we do that. Yeah, I'm loving this, and it's based on the text. Well, okay, it's based on the fact that Gandalf says his name is Incanus in the south. But hey, that's enough
for me.
That's enough. Give us that much opening, and we'll take it for sure. And by the way,
this is the best kind of based on the text.
Absolutely.
Well, and also remember Stephen Cover's note of Sam, wondering if the South Run's really evil. I mean, that's that kind of is.
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that we do on this podcast that is like my favorite, where it's like we're completely coloring outside the lines in the sense that like we're just doing completely new stuff, but none of it. It all feels
plausible within
true.
The canon.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Gandalf wouldn't have a name in the South if he wasn't going down there, and if he didn't have people that he was friends.
Right. Right. And this is just the kind of thing that Gandalf would do. It's the kind of thing we see him doing, right?
Yep.
Not there, but it's the kind of thing that we see him doing elsewhere. It does seem to fit into the world. I agree. Now, Stephen H., who's not a big fan of the idea as a whole, one of his concerns is that it makes Gandalf look ineffective. But see, here's the thing. It's not about Gandalf being effective. It's not about Gandalf succeeding or failing, even, really. We're talking about the choices of people. Gandalf is primarily an influencer. Right? What he does is go around. He doesn't have a power base anywhere. He doesn't ask for anybody. This is not a thing that it's not exactly a project he can succeed or fail in. It's people he can try to help. Maybe they will succeed. Maybe they will fail. He's trying to affect this change in the culture, but if they choose otherwise, they choose otherwise. He can't control them. He can't dominate them. He's not going to dominate them.
Perfectly consistent with Gandalf's depiction of Lord of the Rings. Not exactly a resounding success in Minas Tirith.
Right. No. Right.
Kind of a complete flop with Denethor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And when Theoden's not all that thrilled with him either.
At first, right? Yeah.
First.
Yeah. Gandalf, like in the Lord of the Rings, at least in that role as like I go places and I try to give people a nudge to get them to do the right thing. Mixed track record.
Well, the other thing is that we see, Gandalf wasn't around for, the Second Age stuff with Sauron, right?
Right.
So this experience is going to give Gandalf, like a full-on experience of how bad it could be,
right?
Which is going to fuel him up, which is what we see, when he's with Frodo and he's, at the council and whatnot. He's fueled up, and this is it's like, we don't necessarily have to say it, but it's like we'll know. Well, he saw what happened in the South, and he needs to make sure it doesn't continue to happen.
Absolutely, and here's the other thing to remember. Gandalf 2.0 is fundamentally different. Like, his whole approach is fundamentally different. He is revealed as the chief, player in the game against Sauron. But he's only revealed at the end. And if you think about it, all of the really effective things that he does are after his resurrection.
That's right.
Gandalf, what does Gandalf do? What does he attempt to do? What does he accomplish while Gandalf the Grey, right? Pre-resurrection. That is certainly a mixed bag and all very low key, right? So this is certainly not going to be Gandalf leading the charge, and he is not going to be to the Haradrim what he was at Minas Tirith. Certainly not what he was at the Black Gate, right? He's not even going to be what he was to Theoden at the healing of Theoden, right? The second time he's before Theoden there. So I mean, he is. He's only revealed in power like that after his resurrection. Now, the conflict with the necromancer, Marie, well, yes, with backup, right? He teams up with the rest of them, and they drive Sauron out of Mirkwood there.
The other time we see him potentially slightly unveiled is with the Balrog, but that's
the only other Link
time.
is objecting to me calling the defeating of the Balrog low key. No, of course he stands up to the Balrog, but again, that's the transition to that's where the resurrection comes in, right?
Well,
I'm
and he's
talking
pushed
about his career.
he's pushed to the limit. He's done everything he possibly can, and being faced with ultimate evil kind of thing, right? So he pulls out the big gun at that point, but he doesn't do it any other time.
If we're worried that they were going to make Gandalf look like a failure, I have a suggestion about an opportunity for redemption in a future season frame story. Who's to say Gandalf wasn't there at Erebor when the messengers were showing up?
Interesting.
I mean, I don't know. I'm fuzzy on the exact Gandalf chronology around that time, but maybe he could be there and involved. Maybe we can give him another crack.
He's like, oh no, I've seen this before.
Yeah, well, but here's the thing. Here's my primary response to my secondary response to this makes Gandalf look like a failure thing is that to characterize this as a succeeding or failing thing by Gandalf is too simple. It's not about that. It's about him attempting to resist this thing in this place, but he's not the one making all the choices. And he's not opposing Sauron openly. He's not going to reveal himself and fight off the Nazgul. That's not how he's going to operate at this stage in his career and in the plan. So that's my primary response is I think it's okay for Gandalf to fail early on. I don't think we want Gandalf to have an unbroken pattern of success. I think it's totally fine for this to be, Dave, just as you were saying that when he's at the council of that, we should see moments that we know what Gandalf is thinking, that he is mourning for his friends in Harad who died, right? That he has seen this go badly before. He knows what can happen because he's seen it when things don't go right. So yeah,
and he's not, and we know he's not hailed as a hero in some of the kingdoms.
Right.
I mean,
right. I mean, almost nowhere is he hailed as a hero.
Yeah.
In fact, absolutely nowhere is he hailed as a hero, except maybe in Rivendell, right? But even there, in Elrond's library, he's hailed as a hero. But I mean, there's very few places. He's not even universally popular in the White Council. Right. I mean, there's nobody who throws a parade when Gandalf comes to town, even the hobbits. Right. He's popular in Tuckborough, but nowhere else. So
Galadriel's kind of a fan of his. But
agreed. Galadriel's a fan.
But they go way back.
Yeah, exactly. But again,
by the way,
sorry, go ahead.
We can also, I think, we can give him, I was just thinking about this. obviously one of the things we would have to do is we need to pluck some hope out of the tragedy and despair at the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
There should be like Gandalf should lead away like a I don't know like I don't know. There should be some group of Harad who get out of there, and they go off somewhere else. And we
Further Harad, yes.
Being a man and his two sons, and they establish a kingdom somewhere.
Yeah, they get out of there, and then they should come back sometime in the like at the Battle of the Pelennor or something.
Yeah,
and we should show like Gandalf didn't really fail because he got some people to make a good choice.
That Gandalf is effective in doing what he's doing. That is like that he has succeeded in winning over this, one family or one person plus other folks attached to that one person or whatever, showing the effect that he can have on people and what he has to offer people. We can show that, right?
And then that increases the tragedy of the bulk of the people not doing that.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So here's a really cool thing, and I don't see the answer to this yet. But again, the thing that I loved so much about doing the Harad story from the beginning is that we're able to do the change theme really, really interestingly, right? How this is the return of Sauron has ushered in this new, times are changing in Harad, and things were going in this one direction, and Gandalf was trying to encourage them to go in that direction, and now the Nazgul has come, Sauron has returned, they're being called to their ancient allegiance and worship of Sauron. And anyway, I think it's so the way that change is coming, and what do we do in the face of that change? How do we resist that change? Do we flee? How do we do it? To have because Gandalf is going to have to be sort of confronting that too, right? Gandalf's. So my question that I don't know the answer to yet: what is Gandalf's final answer to the question about what is the proper response to change?
Yeah, no kidding.
Because again, there's a sense in which he is going to be a parallel to the elves who are just trying to stop it, right? Just trying to resist it. Let's just hold Morgoth leaguer in the north and go on with our lives and create, a little utopia down here. And here's Gandalf trying to build his little, Haradrim utopia, right? Pushing that in a new direction. But oh no, let's stave off this change. Instead of recognizing, a change in the world has come. How do we handle that? I don't see the answer. I don't see how he sort of responds to that. But anyway, yeah.
By the way, canon-wise, do we see much of Sauron in the main story this season? I know we will next season. I mean, I know we can insert him. I'm just wondering. I can't remember in the actual book if he doesn't really have any major. Okay.
No, I don't think so. I don't think we get.
Oh,
any
he's doing
Sauron...
the catch and release in our story. Marie says
he is.
So he's busy with the catch and release program.
He is, but I'm thinking like in the published Silmarillion, I don't think we get any Sauron before he takes over Minas Tirith, the Silmarillion Minas Tirith, of course. Right. I think that's the next time he appears. And
Amlok's appearance at the council has Sauron's finger marks.
But that's
on it.
our
So,
idea.
That's our.
We hadn't specified that. So yeah, no, I mean, we had talked about the catch and release program. We still have him doing that, but as far as the canon is concerned, are there any like major Sauron events? No.
But we will then for our story. He will be in somewhere along the line in this season, right? We'll see him, which is just interesting to me. Yeah. I'm not sure there's anything to be done with that, but it's just interesting. So we're going to have him in both stories, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I certainly agree with both Marie and Mike, who are both suggesting that the fake Amlad incident, he's not mentioned there, but it does, as Marie says, has Sauron's fingerprints all over it, right? I mean, it really is very.
The other thing with this, the way we're talking about the frame story now, I don't know that we necessarily have to have any in Mordor scenes, right? The Nazgul, basically, or the emissary is going to be
exactly
the one making the declaration.
Yep, definitely, definitely. I think that the Nazgul could be the one.
Cool.
Which means, by the way, this gives us some time flexibility here. We were talking about dating it to 2951, which is when he sends Kamal back to Dol Guldur and stuff. But
Kamal was actually a Herod king, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think so. I'm thinking. Oh, he was an Easterling. Steven says, okay.
He's Easterling. Okay. All right. Well, that's easy then. We don't have to worry about him.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so here's what I'm thinking. Sauron could have been doing some pre-gaming in Harad even prior.
Oh, prior.
To this,
I got it.
Or
I
like,
get what you're saying. Yeah.
It can be right. So we could bump this up to 2950 or something if we want, but I guess it doesn't matter because we're definitely going to move on to 2952 in the next frame anyway.
Right.
So it doesn't particularly matter, but yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, this is good. I think we've got a really good shape. We got some questions to answer. There's still a lot of work to be done in sorting this out, but I think this is fantastic. This is a fascinating story. There's
It's also it also allows us, it puts us in a space where we can wield a great deal of literary license to invent new characters and then kill them off.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Which we don't ordinarily get to do.
Very true. Very true. Yes. Yeah. No, really cool. Lots of really great opportunities there. I think that's great. Okay, so looking towards next time, because we're about out of time, we've got our next session we'll be holding on May 21st, Thursday, May 21st at 10 p.m. Next time we wanted to start talking about storylines like we did in season 4, right? To kind of work out some of the details. My thought here, my suggestion, this is just a suggestion, and I'd be interested to see what you guys we can prioritize things differently if folks on the discussion boards would like to do that. My thought, though, is I would kind of like to work out the human stories first and then go back to the elf stories. I was tempted to say, hey, let's like nail down the plot arcs for the elf stories first, and then let's go back and add them in. But the more I thought about it, I'm like, no, actually, first of all, because I still feel more at sea about the human stories. I want to do more work there. But secondly, I feel like they're still a pretty unknown quantity. So if we flesh out the human stories and how we want to do those, it'll be easier to kind of take where we left the elves in season 4 and where what we're doing with the humans in season 5, and then be able to use those things to be able to come together and resolve some of the issues that we still had over the course of the season. Sorry, Brian. Brian points out, can we get a Tom Bombadil cameo in Harad somewhere, somehow? No, we can't take him to Harad. I mean, it's one of the this is one of the challenges of the Tom Bombadil cameo thing, is that he doesn't leave, right? But yeah, I agree. We got to think of a Tom Bombadil cameo. So there you go. But he doesn't have to be in the frame. He can be, of course, in the main storyline. But I agree that it is kind of an attractive idea, Brian, to have like, especially Brian, if they don't ever say anything, right? Like if we just show like Tom Bombadil and Goldberry, like in the bazaar, in the background, like they're just across the, the plaza over there. It would be funny. Inappropriate, but funny. So let's do the human storylines. I do want to work out the genealogies. That's one of the things I want to do in order to establish those. And yes, I am coming with my penknife in hand, prepared to excise folks from the genealogies. I will say from the beginning, bring me a compelling reason for them to be there, a reason why they need to be there, and not that the very small role that person in the genealogy plays cannot be filled by somebody else. Give me a reason and we can do it. But I need a reason. We're not going to have any characters who don't have to be there. We have too many characters to just be adding extra ones just because the book says that this character was ruling when they moved from that place to that place. Like, that's not it's not nearly enough for me to include them. That's a job that could be done by somebody else. So anyway, I'm prepared for that, but I want to sort out those things. So I want to go through the genealogies. I want to especially focus on the plot lines of the particular character. I want to resolve the Haleth story. We talked about Haleth a bit more. I want to make sure we get her plot arc clear. I want to get Hador's plot arc clear. I want to work out, of course, Andreth, and make sure that we make some sort of final decisions about where we're going with her character and everything. I want to sort out the Amlach thing. We have like an incident with Amlach, but an incident does not a story arc make, right? So let's see how we can work that out too. So so for me, it's primarily about the characters. Deciding our list of characters, who are going to be, which characters are really our story-bearing characters, and then what exactly their stories are going to be, especially since we need to be connecting it through to the theme and to the larger stories, to the elf stories that are going on. That'll help us to be able to segue into talking about the elf stories next time. I am under no illusions that we are going to talk about all those things next time. But we shall begin talking about those things next time, and that'll be a lot of fun. So, all right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. This was a really great discussion. I did not expect to be talking about Gandalf in Canus riding a white elephant and wearing Bermuda shorts, but I am delighted that my life has been enriched by the fact that this conversation happened. So I am delighted by this. Thanks very much, everybody, for listening. And as always, I will say thanks for listening and Godspeed. Okay, excellent. Very good. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
These are by far the best episodes.
Yeah, isn't the frame good? Aren't you glad we decided to keep the frame in the end, Dave? I know you had serious misgivings at the beginning, but it's kind of fun, right?
It's hard to. I can barely even it's hard to believe that was the case.
That you were resistant to it once.
It works so well.
Yeah,
and we can do all this. Like otherwise, where else would we find we would never find the opportunity and excuse to be like,
no,
hey,
there's never the main story for us to go down there at all.
In Canus and Harad, yeah, exactly. We would never have included that in the plot arc of a season.
Yeah,
No.
So cool.
Kind of incredible.
Yeah, very.
All
awesome.
right.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Good night. See you guys in 2 weeks.
Good night.
Bye now.
Although the theoretical budget of our hypothetical blockbuster may be unlimited, the production budgets of this and the rest of our fun alternative educational projects are unfortunately not. If you have enjoyed joining our production team, please consider donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.